Greg Langley, a self-proclaimed HOA security officer, broke into Alex Rivers' home, cracked his safe, and stole from him, thinking he could get away with it like he always did. Armed with fake authority and an inflated ego, Greg had spent years intimidating his neighbors, making up rules, and treating the community like his personal kingdom. But this time, he messed with the wrong person, because the safe he cracked had a built-in dye trap, leaving him stained blue and completely exposed. And trust me, what happened next turned his smug power trip into the ultimate downfall, proving that justice always finds its way. When Alex Rivers bought his home in the gated neighborhood of Willow Creek, he thought he had found his little slice of paradise. The streets were pristine, the lawns manicured, and the neighbors friendly, but not intrusive. It was exactly what he had been looking for, a peaceful, predictable place to settle down. But there was one thing he hadn't counted on: the HOA cop. Greg Langley was the self-proclaimed security officer of the Homeowners Association. He strutted around in what looked suspiciously like a police uniform, except it wasn't. A dark navy shirt, a fake badge pinned to the chest, a radio always crackling at his hip. It was a costume, but he wore it with the self-importance of a man who believed he was the law. Technically, Greg had no real authority. He wasn't a police officer. He wasn't hired by the city. Hell, he wasn't even an official HOA employee. But that didn't stop him from acting like a dictator. Within a week, Alex had already had his first run-in with him. "You can't park your truck in the driveway overnight," Greg had barked at him on his second day in the neighborhood. "It's my driveway," Alex had replied, confused. "HOA rules," Greg said smugly. That was just the beginning. A few days later, a warning notice appeared on his door. His front doormat was non-compliant. Then came the email about the shade of blue on his shutters being too dark. And when Alex dared to leave his trash cans out 10 minutes past pickup time, Greg left a $100 violation slip in his mailbox. It was harassment, plain and simple. And Alex wasn't the only one. Greg had his hands in everyone's business, slapping homeowners with fines, knocking on doors like some kind of low-budget enforcer. Most people just rolled over and complied, too tired or indifferent to fight back. But Alex, he wasn't the type to be bullied. And then, one evening, Greg took things too far. Alex had been out for most of the day, running errands, enjoying his weekend. By the time he pulled into his driveway, the sun had dipped below the horizon, casting the neighborhood in a warm, golden glow. Everything looked normal. Until he opened his front door, his stomach dropped. The living room was off. The rug, usually perfectly centered, was slightly shifted. The air smelled faintly of something metallic. And then he saw them. Footprints. Dark, muddy footprints tracked across his hardwood floors. Someone had been here. His heart pounded as he stepped further inside, scanning the room. Nothing seemed stolen. His TV, his laptop, all still there. But something gnawed at the back of his mind, a sinking feeling that something wasn't right. Then he saw it. The door to his safe, a small, heavy-duty one he kept tucked away in his office, was wide open. Alex felt a chill creep down his spine. He rushed forward, barely noticing the streaks of dirt leading right up to it. His hands gripped the edges as he stared inside. His cash was gone. His documents gone. Panic and fury surged through him in equal measure. Someone had broken into his home, forced open his safe, and stolen from him. And then, in the middle of his anger, he noticed something bizarre. The inside of the safe wasn't just empty. It was coated in thick, dripping paint. A deep, almost neon blue substance had exploded from within, splattering across the interior, dripping down onto the carpet. It looked like a crime scene from a bad art project. Alex's mind raced. What the hell happened here? Then it clicked. The paint trap. A while back, he had read about high-security safes used in banks. Some came with built-in security measures, like special dye packs that explode when tampered with. It was the same kind of tech used to mark stolen money. Except, in his case, the safe had contained a personal deterrent, a high-grade, non-washable security dye. Whoever had broken into his safe had triggered it. And now, somewhere out there, the thief was covered in blue paint that wouldn't come off. A slow, dark grin spread across Alex's face. He didn't know who had done this, yet. But soon, he would. Alex sat in his dimly lit living room, phone in hand, jaw clenched so tightly it felt like his teeth might crack. His heart hammered as he tapped into the security camera footage from earlier that day. His house had been violated, his safe broken into, his belongings stolen. And he was about to see who had the audacity to do it. The screen flickered to life, and the moment he saw the intruder, a cold, simmering rage coiled in his gut. Greg Langley, the self-appointed security officer of the HOA, the same man who had been making everyone's life hell with his fake authority, his endless fines, his constant power trips. And now, here he was, brazenly walking into Alex's home like he had every right to be there. Greg wasn't in a hurry. That was the part that made Alex's skin crawl the most. He wasn't some desperate thief scrambling to grab valuables and run. No, this was deliberate. Greg took his time scanning the room, eyes flicking over Alex's furniture, his belongings, like he was evaluating him, judging. And then Greg did something that made Alex's fingers tighten around his phone. He smirked, that smug, self-satisfied look, like he was entitled to be here, like he was just doing his job. Alex's breath came out in short, measured bursts, but it wasn't panic, it was fury. Greg made his way to the office, pushing open the door without hesitation. His steps were confident. He knew exactly where he was going. This wasn't random. Alex had seen Greg harass other homeowners in the neighborhood before. He'd seen the way Greg treated the HOA like his personal kingdom, making up rules on a whim just to watch people bend to them. But this was different. This was personal. Greg stopped in front of the safe. He stared at it for a moment, tilting his head like a man contemplating his next move. Then, to Alex's utter disbelief, Greg reached into his pocket and pulled out a set of lockpicks. A chill ran down Alex's spine. This wasn't some random break-in. This wasn't an accident. Greg had come here with a plan. He knelt in front of the safe, carefully inserting the tools, his movements smooth and practiced. This wasn't the first time he had done something like this. That much was clear. Click, click, click. Each tiny sound felt like a hammer striking Alex's patience. Then, the final click. The safe door swung open, and all hell broke loose. A violent splash of thick, neon blue paint erupted from the safe, coating Greg's face, his hands, his clothes in a sticky, glowing mess. Greg let out a strangled yell, stumbling backward, his arms flailing. His foot caught on the edge of the carpet, sending him crashing into a chair, knocking over a lamp in the process. He coughed, sputtering as he tried to wipe the paint from his face, but it only smeared further, soaking into his skin, his pores. He scrambled to his feet, rushing toward the mirror in the hallway. Then he saw it. His entire face was blue, not just a little blue. Deep, electric, unnatural blue. The kind of blue that doesn't wash off. Alex knew exactly what had happened. Months ago, as a security measure, he had installed a dye pack in the safe, a special kind used in banks to mark stolen money. This wasn't just any paint. This was the industrial, non-washable security dye. The more Greg touched it, the worse it would spread. And judging by the way he was now frantically scrubbing at his skin, the realization had just hit him. Greg bolted to the kitchen, grabbing the nearest towel, trying to wipe it away, but it was too late. His reflection in the window confirmed his nightmare. He looked like a goddamn Smurf. Alex could hear his own heartbeat in his ears, but he wasn't sure if it was from rage or the deep, dark satisfaction creeping in. Greg was panicking now. He tried water, scrubbing his arms under the kitchen faucet. It only made it worse. Soap? No effect. He reached for dish detergent, furiously lathering up his hands, rubbing so hard his skin was turning red underneath the paint. But the blue didn't fade. Greg let out a frustrated snarl, grabbing his phone with his now permanently blue fingers, trying to use voice commands because his touchscreen wasn't recognizing his dye-covered hands. Alex leaned back in his chair, watching the footage with cold amusement. It would take Greg days, maybe even weeks, to get rid of that paint, and Alex wasn't done with him yet, because as infuriating as this moment was, as violated as he felt, it still wasn't enough. Greg had broken into his home. He had stolen his money, his documents, his privacy. But most of all, he had thought he could get away with it. Not a chance. Alex's breathing steadied as his rage solidified into something sharper. Greg Langley was about to learn exactly what happens when you piss off the wrong man. The next morning, Alex woke up early. Not because he had to, but because he wanted to see the aftermath. With a fresh cup of coffee in hand, he stepped onto his porch and leaned against the railing, waiting. And then, right on cue, Greg Langley emerged from his house. Alex nearly spit out his coffee. If last night's security footage had been satisfying, this was something else entirely. Greg looked utterly ridiculous. The bright neon blue dye had seeped deeper into his skin overnight, staining him from head to toe in an unnatural, cartoonish shade. His face, neck, hands, hell, even the inside of his ears, were all the same goddamn color. His hair, which had probably absorbed some of the paint when he'd been rubbing at his face like an idiot, had taken on a weird greenish tint at the roots. He looked like a rejected comic book villain, or worse, like someone who had lost a fight with an industrial vat of ink. But the best part, Greg didn't seem to fully grasp just how bad it was. Sure, he looked pissed. His scowl was deep enough to carve trenches into his face, but he still carried himself like he was in control, like he still had power here. Alex just watched, amused, as Greg stormed across the street, fists clenched, shoulders squared, eyes burning with fury. And then Greg did exactly what Alex was hoping for. He came right to him. "You saw this, right?" Greg barked, his voice sharp with rage. He threw out his arms, gesturing wildly to his very blue face. "Some asshole booby-trapped a goddamn safe. Can you believe this shit?" Alex fought to keep his expression neutral, but it was a battle he was rapidly losing. He folded his arms over his chest, tilting his head. "Oh, I believe it," he said, casually sipping his coffee. Greg narrowed his eyes. "What the hell does that mean?" Alex sighed dramatically, shaking his head. "It means... Greg, do you even realize what you did?" Greg scoffed. "What I did," he spat. "I'm the victim here." "And that?" That nearly sent Alex over the edge. He let out a sharp laugh, the sheer audacity of Greg's words making it impossible to hold back anymore. "A victim?" Alex repeated, incredulous. He stepped forward, voice dropping into something cold. "Greg, you broke into my house. You cracked my safe. You stole from me." Greg's jaw clenched, his eyes flickering with something almost like panic. But he wasn't ready to back down yet. Instead, he went on the offensive. "You don't get to just set traps in your own house like a goddamn psycho," he snapped, pointing a blue-stained finger at Alex. "That's illegal." Alex arched an eyebrow. "Illegal?" He let the word hang in the air before scoffing. "Greg, you literally broke into my home." Greg's nostrils flared. "I was protecting the neighborhood," he insisted, desperation creeping into his voice. "I had probable cause to believe you were violating HOA standards." Alex blinked. "By keeping my own belongings in a locked safe?" Greg faltered for just a moment, but then, true to form, he doubled down. "Look, people trust me to keep this community safe," he said, lifting his chin. "I don't expect someone like you to understand that." Someone like me. Alex's amusement evaporated. There it was, Greg's entire fake cop persona, the power trip, the false sense of superiority, all of it in one sentence. He actually thought he was above everyone else. That was the moment Alex decided to bury him. He took a slow, deliberate step forward. "You really think people trust you?" he said, voice like ice. Greg scoffed. "Of course they do." Alex reached into his pocket. "Well, let's put that to the test." He pulled out his phone, tapped the screen, and held it up so Greg could see it. The security footage began to play. The video showed everything. Greg sneaking into Alex's house. Greg creeping through his living room. Greg pulling out a set of lockpicks and cracking open the safe. Greg getting drenched in blue dye like an absolute idiot. And the look on Greg's face as he watched? Priceless. His eyes widened. His mouth opened, then closed again. His posture stiffened. His hands curled into fists at his sides, and then the realization set in. Alex tilted his head. "You sure about that trust thing?" Greg froze, because now he knew it was over. Alex didn't waste any time. The moment Greg froze, realization dawning in his wide, blue-stained eyes, Alex felt something shift inside him. It wasn't just anger anymore, it was control. For months, Greg had bullied, fined, and intimidated the people in this neighborhood. He had ruled with fake authority, feeding off people's frustration and fear, always one step ahead, always untouchable. But now he was the one panicking, and Alex wasn't about to let that slide. He casually swiped through his phone, tapping a few buttons. Then, with a slow, deliberate grin, he looked Greg in the eye. "Let's see what the neighborhood thinks," he said, and he hit send. The neighborhood revolts. Within minutes, the footage spread like wildfire. Alex sent it directly to the HOA group chat, then emailed it to the HOA board members, then posted it on the neighborhood forum. People were furious. For years, they had put up with Greg's harassment, his fines, his made-up rules. They had suspected he was power-hungry. Some had even joked that he took things too far, but no one realized just how bad it was. Now they had proof. One by one, the messages flooded in. "Are you kidding me? This guy broke into a house? This is insane. How was he even allowed to run security? I knew he was a creep, but holy shit. We need to get rid of him. Now!" By noon, an emergency HOA meeting had been called. Greg wasn't invited. The vote to remove him from the HOA board was unanimous. His so-called position of power? Gone. The smug, fake cop persona he had built for himself? Shattered. But that was just the beginning, because Alex had one more card to play. The final blow. That afternoon, Alex walked into the local police station with his phone in hand. He didn't even have to explain much. He simply pulled up the footage, handed it over, and let the video speak for itself. The officers watched in stunned silence. When it ended, one of them let out a low whistle. "Well," the officer said, leaning back, "that's about as open and shut as it gets. Greg Langley was arrested that evening. Charges: breaking and entering, trespassing, theft, and property damage. His desperate excuses. His 'I was just doing my job' nonsense didn't hold up. Not when there was concrete, undeniable evidence of him picking a damn lock on video. The HOA had already cut ties with him. The neighborhood had turned against him. And now he was facing actual jail time. The trial. Alex didn't have to attend Greg's hearing, but he went anyway. And when he saw him sitting there, still faintly stained blue, his hands blotchy with remnants of the dye that refused to fully fade, Alex felt something deep inside him settle. Greg Langley, who had strutted around their community like a king, was now just another criminal sitting in a courtroom, waiting for a sentence he couldn't escape. He looked pathetic. The judge didn't even take long to decide. The evidence was overwhelming. Greg was found guilty on all counts and sentenced to community service, a hefty fine, and a permanent ban from any future HOA positions. He had spent so much time pretending to be the law. Now, the law had put him in his place. Justice served. As Alex stepped out of the courthouse, he let out a long breath, feeling lighter than he had in months. Greg was gone. The neighborhood was finally free of his bullshit. And best of all, every time someone Googled Greg Langley, they'd find a police report about a wannabe cop who got arrested after breaking into someone's house and turning himself blue in the process. A legacy he'd never live down. Alex smirked, slipping his hands into his pockets. Justice had never looked so satisfying.